some interested people to hear about music industry and stuff. So we've got Ben, who's leading his first meeting tonight, so be kind. But he's very excited. And then Jacob is going to help him out. And the other Jacob may hop in to help out too.
Me, Jacob?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jacob H in the beginning and Jacob M at the end. It's gonna be music videos at the beginning and recording at the end.
All right. So let's get started, guys. Look at this. Look at this. Okay, can you all see this?
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk music. Really important subject, guys. If you're going into film or basically anything in the arts, very important. So first section of this, I'll be talking about music videos, basically, you know, what makes them appealing today and why they're important. And then in the second half, we'll talk about music recording, sort of like the basics of it, and then I'll give you guys like a little preview about how I do it. So yeah, first thing we need to define is a music video. So a music video is a short film that integrates music with visuals for artistic and or promotional purposes. You'll notice that even in the examples that we'll show later on, there's some that are, you know, mainly geared toward the artist, you know, trying to exemplify, you know, their art in a more expansive way. And then others that are, you know, more about getting the artist's name out there. And so they're generally limited to the length of the song, but there are also many different approaches.
All right, so I'm just going to talk about the history of kind of how they developed over time. So first we have like the early musical shorts. So this was back in the 20s, and it kind of spanned up until like the end of the 50s. So a lot of these were, it kind of started with silent films, as the music was the only thing really to accompany it. But that was usually kind of played in person, so when it was being shown in the theater. But when Soundies came out, they could actually include the music with it. So there was, for example, that I put there with there's a link on the shorts. They used to kind of make these short films that were centered around a song and kind of give like a backstory to the song. So Ben, I don't know if you want to click on it or not. We don't have to watch it, but so this is just she was a very popular blues singer back in the 20s and 30s. It basically just runs through a whole story of kind of like about the song, and then at the end the song is performed in the setting of in the context of the story. So yeah, that's kind of how it was back then. It wasn't they weren't as truncated to how it is now. There was also cartoons. So like a good example is Fantasia, which is a whole movie, but a lot of that was really a big trend with these earlier music videos is that it's more about being a sort of promotional material for it. So that's when going up to 1975 with Bohemian Rhapsody, it was first thought of released as part of a promotional strategy, and is considered like the first official music video. And then a few years later, we have the birth of MTV, and this is kind of when the modern era of, our modern definition of what a music video is. So the first video they ever played was Video Killed the Radio Star, which is kind of ironic in itself. But since then, music videos turned to more of a form of entertainment, and with online content, like with the internet, it's kind of turned less about promotion and more about being like I said, this form of entertainment, but something that kind of is expected and desired by fans. And with like YouTube rebranding them, you can watch them at any point. So like MTV was limited to, you kind of just watched and whatever was there was there, which gave a lot of exposure to different things. With YouTube, it's kind of, you can keep watching, and I know I've done it, you can keep watching the same music video over and over again, and it just kind of changes the whole nature of how people interact with them. Yeah, so you want to go to the next slide, I guess, Ben?
Yeah, so now let's talk like a little more about the different types of music videos, because like we said, there's the promotional side and then there's the artistic side, but even within those, like now there's like different layers. So the first is the story-driven one, which is like it's almost like solely based on the story, and sometimes they're connected to the song and sometimes they're not, but the point is just to like create a world or environment that you're brought into that isn't just the soundscape. And then there's the freeform type, which is no direct story, but there's a lot of use of imagery to try to connect the meaning of the song with some type of visual. Then there's the marketing version, which is basically just about trying to create visuals that will sell the artist or something that connects the artist to their brand. And then there's this live performance type, which kind of comes in all different forms, but they're usually just showcasing how the artist performs, and it's often promotional, not very artistic. But yeah.
All right, so impact. So we kind of split this up into two things. So there's the intentions of the artist and then the results of kind of what happens when they make the video. So from the artist's perspective, when they create a music video, a lot of it is really to increase that audience base and the general traffic around it. So like I said, when you have fans that are going to keep watching that video over again, you want that because you want to keep your name in the popular space. And also, obviously, it's create a visual interpretation of a song that people can connect to and really further experience that song rather than just sonically. And a lot of that is really balancing that image and sound, which is definitely easier said than done. And then the results of that is that from the audience's perspective, it's going to definitely change, no matter what the video is, even if it really does a great job at, capturing the artist's intentions of the song, it's going to still change the perception. So if you listen to a song a bunch of times, or even just once, and then you watch the video, thereafter, I feel like a lot of people could agree that they think of the song differently or perceive it in a different way. And that goes for better or for worse. Sometimes there's a song that you really like and it really reminded you of something, but then you watch the video and then you connect it with something, it kind of takes away the magic, or you connect it with something bad or negative. And also with anything that the artist puts out, it's going to connect that image with the artist. So like with the changing perception of the song, this could also negatively or positively impact the artists themselves, because if they're going to be putting something out that turns out to be hated by a lot of people, it could really harm that individual, and that could follow the artist thereafter. So we each picked a couple of music videos that we thought were kind of illustrative of the points we were talking about. We're only going to show one each, but the one that I want to show is Boy Pablo's Every Time. Just to talk about it a little bit before we watch it. The video itself is very like casual, and it's almost like a school project. Like it's very like unprofessional. But because of that, it's kind of it was what kind of brought it into the made it popular, sorry. So just with this thumbnail alone that's up on the screen on the top right, that I've read a couple articles actually that just talking about that thumbnail itself is what kind of made it blow up, just because something about that thumbnail. I even had that picture on the back of my phone for a while just because it looks so dumb, but it's like you want to click on it because you want to see like, what is this? And it kind of embodies the song itself, but also just what the band is trying to like capture with their music. So if you want to click on it, Ben, and just watch like it for a little bit. The whole thing is that they're just not taking it seriously.
As you can see, she hasn't met him yet. She already fell in love, I bet. Her keyboard gets slammed by her fingers, but he replies with okay every time, every time. She doesn't know who he is. No, she doesn't know what he's up to. Oh, she doesn't know who he is.
Yeah, so as you can see, it doesn't really follow any of the rules of what a professional video would be like. It's just kind of, it's overexposed. There's no real like thought put into framing or anything. It was just kind of filmed like in the spur of the moment, very improvised. And I think that it's a good example of something that like there are so many ways to be successful in making a music video, and it's not just to like make this movie level like A-list movie like great looking film. I mean, like the other example I put is J. Cole's She Knows, which is definitely more of like it looks like a scene in a movie, and it's really well done. It's kind of the opposite of Boy Pablo's video in that way, but they're both very successful at capturing what the song is about, but they just do it in a completely different way. I also included, if anyone wants to watch it, my animation project from Jana's class last semester, which is kind of, I don't know, you can watch it if you want.
Yeah, let's play it.
No, okay. You don't have to play the whole thing. You can kind of just like skip around.
We'll be doing for us, and I'm giving up my life. You know it's big, but never give. And now the things are changing for the worse. See, wow, it's a crazy world we're living in, and I just can't see that half of us immersed in sin is all we have to give these futures made of virtual insanity. Now always seem to be governed by this love we have for useless twisting of that new technology. Oh, now there is no sound, but we all live underground. And I'm thinking what a mess we're in. Hard to know where to begin. If I
I just wanted to show that part.
Yeah, it was really choppy over what's it called, but
All right, so now I will talk about some of the music videos. I chose sort of going with the Boy Pablo idea, which is like a very loose representation that's more aiming to like what the artist's original intentions are and what they're trying to market. this is an example of probably like a more expensive, high budget type like shoot and edit that you would see today, and it's more common among like music videos. This artist Biba Doobie is like popular with Vivo, and they like love making her videos. And what they're really going for is like the recreation of this like 90s 2000s aesthetic, and they do that with a lot of heavy editing, and which is like pretty common in most music videos, especially rap music videos today. But let's just watch a little bit so you get an idea.
Talked about it. Maybe it's time to cooperate. I need some help to forget about it. I don't want your sympathy. Stop saying you give a shit, 'cause you don't really care, 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 yeah. Care, 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 yeah. It's been a while since I thought about it. Maybe it's time to communicate. I was saving to think about it. The fact I still can't forget about it. I don't want your sympathy. I guess I've had it rough, but you don't really care, 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 yeah. Care, 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 yeah. Care.
So yeah, as you can see with that music video, it's there's no story structure. It's completely about the recreation of this image and trying to brand this artist, which is successful. Obviously, it works, and you know, it's a very like it's a strategy. It's definitely a successful strategy. I decided I'm gonna show a little bit about this next music video. This one sort of has a story, I guess. It's like a very absurd story.
Kind of have to like interpret it from it. I feel
Yeah.
like.
The lyrics have nothing to do with what's going on in the video, but I think it's just worth showing for a little bit.
Drunk girls have a couple of heart attacks. Drunk girls are unusually mild, but drunk boys taking pace with a pedophile. Drunk girls are unusually wild. Drunk girls get invitations from nations. They have the patience of the millions of saints, but still, they steal from the cupboard. Drunk girls like to file complaints. Drunk girls were like a night of simplicity. They need a lover who's smarter than me. But drunk boys, we rock like potato lines in the fireplace. Drunk girls give them too many tries. Drunk girls, 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 and
Yeah. So that one's fun. I always interpret that one as like the weird like people are like the audience, and like what the artist is always like trying to provide for them, and how the greedy they are. And I thought that was an interesting take, especially for a music video, because that's kind of the purpose of them. So I don't know. We're a little bit ahead of time, but I think that's okay. Um, let's go to your questions if you have any.
I can ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. So how does an artist know the right videographer to connect with? Because there's like you said, there's a lot of different types of music videos, but I feel like different videographers have different strengths and are hired by different people. So they're not always asked to be versatile, but I don't know. I don't know if you would know any of.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because honestly, it's kind of difficult to find somebody who will, do your music video the way you want it to. Some music video directors like to take complete control over it, and others will, work side by side with you. But I think what it really comes down to is the connection that you have with the person. Like if you're able to like express your ideas with them clearly and they're able to understand it, then it works really well. I know that today a lot of rap music videos are produced by like television companies and like big people. It's not just indie freelancers doing the work nowadays. So
I also think like the difficulty is dependent on how big of an artist it is, because definitely when you're a high profile artist, it's going to be a lot easier for you to, like, with all your connections that you have and everything you have available to you, you'll be able to find someone that fits your style, and people will be like reaching out to you that want to work with you and potentially make videos for you because they think that they could fit your style. But like he said, like if you don't have all that access available to you, then all those resources available to you, it's going to be really hard if you're just an indie artist, like just like starting off,
Right.
yeah. So
I'm curious, where do you think the line is between a film score and a music video? Like if you're scoring something and you make music for video versus making a video for music, I guess that's a definition, but where do you think the boundary is?
that's a good point. I think it's really about emotions in that sense, because when you're trying to make a score for a film, you sort of have an idea of the emotion. It's just you're coming at it from the angle with already having, the visuals. And then for a music video, it's like you have the emotion, but you have it in the form of sound. So I think it's almost like it's not necessarily two different people that are able to do it, but some people are able to hear things and then come up with images, and then some people are better at seeing images and then coming up with sound. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's the only thing you could really like definitively come up with, is that it's just kind of the order of like what comes first. But that's something that I find interesting, just because I think that either way you're kind of separating music from video. You're kind of saying they're two different things, whereas like I think they can be more complementary and comprehensive than a lot of music videos are seen as. Like I think that you can make, I don't think they need to be so separated. Like even in like schools, just the way they talk about music and video, I think that they're treated very separately, but I think the goal is always for them to kind of be cohesive, even in a music video or a film score. So I'm just interested in that kind of like how those, where the boundary exists,
yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm studying TRF and I've been a musician my whole life, so I'm kind of like always balancing these two worlds, and I'll agree with you. But I think it comes down to emotions and what you're like able to express the best. Jacob, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I don't know. I'm really thinking about it like just with what I've made in the past, because I've made music videos. I've made videos that are kind of just a blend of like both of them, like both music and picture, but there's no real definitive um, feature, I guess you'd say, like the driving force.
I mean, they both come down to art. You're making art no matter what, so like it has to, express some type of emotion. That's how I think of it.
Yeah, it's about like what you, with your intentions, what you try to make like the focus of the piece, and that kind of comes down to what the context of like the music and the visuals are. So like depending on how, like with the image that you create, or the way you craft the sound, like if it's going to be an instrumental, I feel like it's harder for it to come across as the driving force of the whole thing, just because that's conventionally not usually like what people think of as a song. um, and there's points in like, I mean, it's hard because like usually we like on the terms of seeing something as a music video, it's usually just going to be limited to that song itself. It's not going to be like, well, obviously if it's a whole movie, then it's not going to be about the song. um,
It's interesting because like usually with a film, like if you took the music out of a film, people would say it's still the film. But if you took a shot out of the film, they might not say it's the film. So it's like they're treated very like separately in a way where it's like it's like the music is just there in the case of a film to help the film, and in a music video the video is just there to help the music. But there's this really interesting thing it's just like a quick thing. It's just I was watching this video where there was this guy, I forget his name, he was talking about the relationship between music and images, and it was about like polyrhythms. But really what it comes down to is that like an image and like color is a very like high frequency wavelength that you're seeing, and it's like it's like the frequency of it is really high, I guess, is like the basis. And then like a sound is a much lower frequency wavelength, and obviously like one is in like electromagnetic spectrum and one is like a sound mechanical spectrum. But the idea is just that like when you take a rhythm, like a sound where you're hearing a rhythm and you're really hearing the rhythm, and you speed it up really, really fast, you start to get a pitch. And then if you speed it up even faster, you get like an image, basically, because you're speeding up a frequency so fast that it becomes like a visual wavelength. And it's kind of abstract, but when it kind of like sparked my mind, like you can think about like image and like rhythm, and like even the editing in something has a sort of musicality to it. And it's like just kind of the cohesion between sound and film, I think, is something that's being explored, like even like scientifically. It's an interesting thing to explore.
That's really cool.
yeah, I
I would
agree.
love to read that article if you had it.
I'll send it to you. I'll put it in the chat. I'll look for it. It's called like New Horizons Polyrhythms. It's more interesting than I'm even describing. Like he takes a drum beat and he just he takes like bum 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 bum, just like a drum beat, and then he speeds it up and he speeds it up and he speeds it up, and then at a certain point the rhythm of the drum is going so fast it basically becomes a sound frequency and it becomes a pitch. So it's like frequency becomes pitch, and then the abstraction from pitch is a visual image. So it's really interesting. I'll link it in the chat.
I think that's interesting. And I didn't really think about frequencies and balance until I started mixing my own music, and also until Shayna's production class, actually, because we were talking about how like color grading is on a spectrum and you're basically like trying to, find a medium. And that's very similar to what you're doing with sound. And like it's all these like pieces that you're layering on top of each other. And that's basically, what both of these types of production are. So I think that's really interesting. So do you guys have any more questions? Cool. So Now we'll break off from video and just talk about recording music. And Jacob, if you want to add stuff to once I'm like in Logic and talking about that stuff, then feel free to add in. Yeah. All right. You guys can see everything? Okay. So recording music, I'll start with the basics so you guys get an idea. Decibels are a unit of measurement. They're actually a proportion, which I found out recently. I just thought that was cool. But it's basically an increment of sound and how you measure it. There's peaking and clipping, which is basically when the input is too high to receive, like the volume is too high for a microphone or whatever instrument you're using to pick up is too high to actually record or annotate. And that causes clipping. So peaking causes clipping. Then you have mono versus stereo. Mono is a single, input of sound, and then stereo is the left and right. And then you have diegetic versus non-diegetic sound, which is basically diegetic is sound you can see on the screen, and then non-diegetic is sound that you cannot see. So yeah, here's a list of a bunch of sound editing and mixing programs. You have Pro Tools, which is the industry standard. Then you have Logic Pro, which is basically the Mac version of Pro Tools. Then there's Ableton Live, FL Studio. Those are both, I think, well, Ableton I know for sure is a like beats making software. Like you can make a bunch of synthetic sounds in there. I believe FL Studio is the same, but I have not used it. GarageBand is a pretty base level, recording software. And then there's Adobe Audition, which you can use. I've used it almost only for like film stuff, but I think you can do other sound editing in there too. And then there's Audacity, which is a free program. You can record whatever you want in there. So yeah. I wanted to do a little talk about sound houses and recording studios because I think it's kind of important. If any of you guys are interested in like joining this industry, then there's like certain things you need to know, whether you're joining it for film or for recording music. So a sound house is a company that creates and mixes sound for a film. And these companies usually pair with post houses because not all post houses have equipment for a full-on recording studio. And something I've noticed, like as a musician and from personal experience, is that a lot of recording studios nowadays are like becoming more equipped with visual capabilities. And this is because it's like so important for artist branding to like have some type of visuals or videos to like pair with the artist. It's like almost like you have to be a complete like multimedia faceted character in order to like become famous these days, or just to like showcase your music properly. But some of the difficulty arises with, young indie artists where this is too expensive for them to accomplish, or what they're making doesn't properly fit their image. Yeah. So here are the stages of mixing music. This also goes kind of for mixing film as well. So it begins with mix organization, which is basically, color coding everything and making sure everything is linked to like a file, very similar to like editing video. And then there's gain staging, which is the step before you balance audio. And gain staging, I like to think of gain as like, the input volume. So for those of you that don't know, gain is like basically the amount of sound that is let in, and then volume is kind of the amount of sound that's let out. So yeah, you gain stage your music so that everything's at the same level first, then you balance the audio, the volume. Then there's compression. You want to compress your songs or compress your entire tracks. That basically just cuts out like all the extraneous frequencies. Then there's other dynamic compressors. So like besides compression, you can apply a bunch of other effects, which I'll show you in the program later. Then there's panning, which is like choosing the sides of the speakers where the sound comes from or comes out from. And then your final step is applying whatever type of effects you want to the sound. So now that we've gone over all that, I'll drop you into, sorry, I'm just reading the chat real quick, making sure. Okay, I'll drop you into Logic, into a song that I'm currently mixing, just to show you kind of what it looks like, and I'll go into more detail. So right here is basically the menu that you'll use for organizing and recording. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see each individual track. And a track is where, you know, the original audio for something is recorded, and you can split that up however you please. You usually do it by instrument. So we have tracks, and then we have bussing, and then we have stems. So up here is the mixer board. So this is where you do a lot of the mixing, and you also choose like the effects that you want. So right here you can see all these volume changes that I've made, and right here on each of these tracks is a gain plugin. So you can see I've altered the gains for each of these tracks, which is the first step that I did. Then I went down and did the audio. And then over here, I have the channel EQ, which I'll go into more detail right now. So channel EQ, basically in all of sound, there's a bunch of frequencies. So sound is about, sound comes out in frequencies. So over here on this left end of the spectrum, you have like the lower hertz, which is how it's measured. And then you have 20 hertz up to 20K hertz. This is like a very, very low tone, like I think like elephants can hear it or something. And then over here you have like dog whistle tone, which is like 10 to 15K or something. And basically what you do with a channel EQ is you bring up and bring down the different types of frequencies that you want most prominent in your track. And this will eventually change like the tonality of that instrument. So I'm gonna isolate the guitar track and just show you guys like what messing around with the EQ sounds like. So here's guitar. Wait, let me get guitar one. So here's the track. You can see I've already done the frequency. And if I move it around, wait, it's not working. Hang on. Hang on, actually, let me do it on the vocals so it's easier to understand. Okay.
fall to the ground.
There's also like a lot of effects on right now, so
Leaves fall to the
you can hear how I'm
ground.
like moving, you know, the tone.
I come back into focus. Wake from a sleeping sound. And as I sit here in the pit.
So yeah, that's basically how EQ works. And then I'll also show you guys compression real quick. This is kind of what compression looks like. Basically, when you first put on a compression effect, you choose the thresholds, so the amount of decibels that you want affected by it. And then you choose a ratio, so like a ratio of the amount of sounds that you want limited. And then the rest of the stuff is important. Then you have the attack and release. So the attack is like when the compression takes effect, when it first picks up sound, and then the release of compression, so when it lets up. Yeah, so that's basically it. I'm not sure what else to show you guys. Jacob, is there anything you'd like to add, possibly?
Me, Jacob, or him, Jacob?
Yes, you, Jacob.
Oh, me. Oh, well, I guess do you talk about reverb at all?
No, I can talk about that actually.
Yeah, I mean that's a big. You might want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so reverb kind of functions like delay, but it's different because it takes the sound and expands it to make it feel like you're more in a room and doesn't like box you out. I'll play the vocals with reverb and then without reverb, and you'll notice the difference. I'll first turn off delay, so it's just reverb. And then I'll isolate it as well. Sorry, this is like kind of all over the place, guys.
Leaves fall to the ground.
That is with reverb, and then this is without.
I come back into focus. Wake from sleeping sound.
So as you can see, it like completely changes the sound. It makes it much brighter and like really fills the room. It kind of makes it sound like you're yelling down a hallway. And it like takes like a simple level of production and really expands it because it makes it sound much less flat. So yeah, that's it. Do you guys have any questions? I can't even see your faces.
Yeah, miking.
Oh, sure. I'll show you guys my like little setup real quick of how I record this stuff. So, yeah. Can you all see me? Actually, I'll stop sharing screens so it's easier. Okay. Hi, guys. This is how I record stuff. I got my guitars over here. And then down here, I have my amp, which is mic'd up with an SM57, which is the industry standard for recording music. And then over here, I have my microphone for singing. When you record drums, you usually want to have them in a separate room and you mic up each individual drum, or you can just do like a bunch of overhead mics. But yeah, so basically the sound, you play through the amp, the microphone picks it up because you want the sound to come directly from an amp if you want it to be good quality, because a DAW or something, which is, I don't even know the acronym, but is basically an amp built into the recording system. And they're usually just not as replicable of like real sound. So you want to mic up your amp And then the amp goes into an interface, which processes the sound. You can also change the volume on it. And then the interface goes directly into your computer. So that's pretty much it. Yes, digital audio workstation. I always forget that term.
Nice jazz master, by the way.
Thank you.
So where can we check out your music?
Nothing is released yet, but as soon as it is, you guys can check it out. I'll let y'all know.
Something I've noticed about like sound mixing is just in the way it differs from images and how images are processed is that it's very like plugin centric, whereas like in a lot of video programs you're using effects, but a lot of the times, especially in stuff like something like Nuke or even After Effects, you're kind of making an effect more, whereas like in a DAW, like a lot of the time it's like you're just taking a plugin and you're messing with the plugin and you're even automating it similar to how you would put keyframes on something. Like that's kind of the analogy for audio for keyframes is automation. It's just that it's very it's not as like ground up as a lot of video editing softwares, or at least like effect stuff I've used. Is like you're starting with a plugin that's kind of designed for you, and you kind of can't really operate without plugins. Like you really need them to be able to do anything. So like before I got into video and I was really only doing like sound mixing, I was like, there's video plugins? How would it didn't, I was like, what? So that's like and then they kind of model after a lot of hardware gear. And I guess a lot of what you're doing with video probably stems from some kind, I mean, they had to use some kind of like mechanical device beforehand, but a lot of plugins for audio are directly modeled off of hardware that was used before digital was around. A lot of like, and they're like boxes, and they're called plugins because you would plug something into them and then a wire would come out. So that's where a lot of that stuff comes from, and you're really doing a lot of processing with plugins.
Yeah, I feel like for sound and like comparing like video and sound, you're definitely, that's so true. I never even thought about it, because like you're kind of like how you said, you're kind of limited when you're in the DAW, where it's just like you kind of keep messing with the settings with the plugins that's already there. I feel like any sort of like creation of like inventing new sounds has to be done like while recording, like in like not on the computer, like on the instrument itself, whether you do something with the instrument or like tamper it in some way or do some weird like configuration with the recording setup. Whereas like with video, you said, where it's like a lot of it can be done, you kind of build that effect.
Yeah, I think unlike the hardware talk with like video versus audio, I think the other thing is with audio, you have to think a lot more about the audience's hardware. With video, like obviously like some people are gonna have like different style monitors and stuff, but you kind of just design for like the best possible scenario monitor. With audio, you have to like I know whenever I do anything, I like listen to it through like nicer headphones, earbuds, speakers, and then like in music, the big thing is like the car test, where you like play it through your car speakers, and if it sounds good there, then you're pretty much good to go. But it's just like it's definitely an extra level, because a lot of times you'll like finish mixing something, and you're like, oh, this sounds perfect, it sounds so good, and then you like listen to it through like phone speaker, and you're like, oh my god, this is like absolutely horrendous. And sometimes there'll even be like a completely like new sound that you didn't even hear on your other speakers or something, just because it's not in their frequency. So I think, yeah, for anyone like who hasn't done much audio but wants to get into it, I think the biggest thing is just like make sure you make time to make it perfect for every device, which is hard, and you're gonna have to like sacrifice some things, but it's super important if you want it to be universally available to people.
Yeah, that step's kind of like you usually, if you have the ability to send it to like a mastering person, you would do that, and that's like the mastering stage is the last stage of everything, where they do the volume balance and like some EQ and stuff. But yeah, that becomes like definitely an issue because a lot of speakers have like specific frequency response that's, in a way, I mean, color across monitors definitely differs, but I mean, the color on an iPhone compared to the color on like a computer or even a TV, well, TV is kind of weird sometimes, but like the color is not going to be as different, I think, as the frequency response of the speakers you're dealing with, like a phone speaker versus like a movie theater as compared to a phone monitor versus the color on that versus a movie. I think there's a bigger difference in the audio spectrum. And also, I guess like the analogy to video would be like the final color corrections to try to make it best across a lot of formats.
I think what's most important about that is that the fact that with audio you have to balance it in so many different ways, testing it on like what it will sound like on different devices, is that you have to be like, you have to have a really keen ear for it, just as you have to have a good eye for, you know, color grading. I'm not like trying to bash that, but I think for audio it's extremely important to like, because you're doing a lot of your work based on your ear and like trusting in the sound that what you're making or getting out of is like something that you want to show.
Yeah, and I think you need to like make sure that you train yourself on your setup. Because that's the thing, like the first few times you do something, you have to like test it on all these different outputs. But once you get used to your hardware, you like your ear will automatically start being able to like figure out how it's going to sound and everything, and you'll like kind of be able to tune in. But if you're constantly switching your hardware, it's going to be impossible to like get that muscle memory.
Yeah, also from my experience, the same thing with like testing your mix on like oh, you want to check it in a car, you want to check it on your phone, can easily go the wrong way, like the opposite way. If you're mixing something on your laptop with your laptop speakers, you shouldn't do that. But if you are, you're not going to hear any of the high frequencies, you're not going to hear any of the bass frequencies. So then when you mix a film with the computer speakers and then you go to bring it into the screening with like the big bass speakers in the theater, you're going to blow out the speakers in the auditorium in your school. I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, you say this like you've had experience with it.
No, never.
Yeah, I still remember for, I think it was like my 205 film, everything was sounding great and like the editing student like on headphones, and like we tested all these different speakers, and as soon like the first time we showed it in the actual auditorium, as soon as anyone spoke, the bass just like shook everything, and I was like, oh nope, you don't realize how much bass a voice has until it's played through actual like auditorium speakers.
I'll say another thing about like making sounds in a computer. It does become like Jacob was saying, that a lot of it comes to what you're putting in to get a certain timbre of an instrument. But then of course like there's like VST synthesizers and stuff. And then once you get into synths and stuff, then you can really start getting into creation from a computer. And then that becomes a whole nother ball game where you really are kind of building from the ground up a lot of the time. Like you'll just start with, in a lot of synths, that if you're not using a preset, you start with a sine wave and then you build up from that. And that becomes really interesting. And to me, that's been what I've been into a lot lately. And it becomes like, you discover a whole new world of like actually creation versus just mixing. It's really cool. And I mean, I keep comparing it to like video stuff, but I guess it's kind of like analogous to like animation or something, where you're really kind of building stuff from the ground up in an interesting way.
So is there anyone here who writes music and doesn't know how to record it, or can record it but doesn't know how to mix it? Jason, speak up.
I was just gonna ask like, what do you think is like the best or like the simplest way to get started? Because I made the music for Mr. Gleb, but that was just because I happen to have an audio interface at home and a computer with Logic on it, and then I was just able to record. Like it didn't have to be like it could just be kind of like experimental type music for my 205 film. But like if I actually wanted to record something like legitimately, but like whenever I open up Logic, it's like really confusing at first, and then you watch a video and then it's still confusing. So like, how do you suggest that someone gets started with this kind of thing?
Are you referring to the recording aspect that you want to perfect, or is it the mixing aspect that you want to perfect?
Probably the recording aspect.
I think the most important thing for recording is making sure you have like a nice quiet room and you have everything mic'd up properly. Other than that, like it's almost standard across the boards. It's a little different when you're recording the different types of instruments. Like drums sort of need their own space, and they need to be like definitely mic'd up properly, and isolated in that fact. But recording vocals is pretty standard. You could do it like in a closet or something.
Something I've noticed is that like there's a lot of tried and true ways to do things, but ultimately it's kind of what sounds good is good. And I've heard recordings from an iPhone microphone and I'm like, that sounds like pretty good. And it's like there's really a lot of room for experimentation with recording, like mic placement. And like mic placement can sometimes matter as much as the mic you're using. Like there's a lot of like, I mean, basically you want to do it like start with like get like Ben was saying, like an SM57, and like get like I have like a Scarlett Focusrite interface, and like from that you can do a lot. You don't need to, I mean, I don't know, you can get into a lot of gear and stuff and be really worried about like how you're doing things with recording, and it's best to probably just start pretty basic and not worry too much about it, because it could sound good and you might not even be doing it how someone would tell you to do it. So yeah.
And when it comes to mixing, I've noticed that just playing around with the sound is the best way to learn. Like I didn't know anything about channel EQ, and I just started like playing around with it. I watched like a few videos, but it was really just me like listening and trying to replicate the sound I wanted to hear.
And is Logic hard to use on a small laptop? Because it looks like it opens up so many different pop-up windows.
There's actually a very convenient shortcut, which is just Command 1 and Command 2, which is switching between the two screens that you saw there, which is like the one with like all the tracks, which you would probably use to record. That's the easiest one. And then the second one, which is like the mixer board. So it's pretty fast. I was just like also balancing the like Zoom call, so like it was kind of difficult.
Cool. Well, we are at our hour mark, so if anyone has any last questions.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I've tried using Logic Pro, and I've never used any external instruments, and I've always had trouble trying to get all the volumes to match up. But I've only used stock sounds. So I don't know if I just have to stop using stock sounds, or if I would have to just try to mix it better, like EQing and reverbing, and it just never works. But I also don't know the right measurements for each effect, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I kind of skipped over this, and I kind of wanted to talk about it. So like the last slide in my demonstration, I talked about like gain staging and the balancing of the volume. It's like really important that you do those things in order, because it's like everyone wants to like start messing around with like audio effects and stuff and like making their music sound cool. But like it's really important, if you want like a well-produced track, to have every gain stage balanced out and then every volume stage leveled out. And the goal is to hit negative 18 decibels for each one of your sounds, which allows for not too much room to peak and not too much room to like clip, and it also isn't too quiet. And if you have a track that like kind of hits all those sounds and you're watching them go, you want to like, the way I did it was I chose like the loudest part of my song and just played it on a loop and just like kept messing around with it until it was like balanced properly, which is something that, you know, you're not doing anything wrong by using stock sounds or anything. It's just a matter of really getting those levels to match.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks, guys.
Well, thank you guys.
This is awesome.
We try to do sound as much as we can, but it's hard to find people who want to lead sound, especially over Zoom. It's a lot harder. So